Hello, welcome to the Birchal Podcast. I'm your host, Emily McFarlane. Today we have a wonderful guest. We've got James Young from Old Young's Distillery, known for its handcrafted spirits. And I know that you've won numerous awards and you're emphasising on quality and local ingredients, so welcome.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here.
It's lovely to have you.
It's just fantastic to actually get across to Melbourne and be right in front of you.
It's nice to have a little bit of Birchal royalty in the house, actually. I know that you've done a raise through Birchal before and just about to embark on another raise, which is really, really exciting. What brought you to equity crowdfunding?
Excellent question. Look, I think it's the whole package. It's that, yes, it's access to equity, but it's the people you get to bring along the ride with you, and it's the access to that community and giving that community an opportunity to invest in us and invest not just in cash, but also like that mental investment and that want to be a part of something. And so that whole package is the attraction. It's the fact that people who are excited about what we're doing get to have a tangible part of what we do.
And what does the community mean to you in terms of your business?
It means everything. Like, since we've done that raise, it's been fantastic because that's a whole group of people that we can tap into. So we're distillers. So when we launched our national sales team, we could go to those investors in Brisbane or Melbourne or Sydney and say, hey, look, we're coming into Brisbane. What bars do you want to see us in? It gives us such an incredible resource around the country that we can tap into, and it's people who are excited about our products and now invested in the business in every way. And so, yeah, it's just been a really exciting way to engage with our community.
And you feel like they're able to kind of steer your trajectory as a business?
Yeah, to an extent, absolutely. So it's those people on the ground have resources. You've just picked up in our industry. Our industry relies on brand ambassadors, right? That's in booze. That's how it works. You want to have those people who are going out there advocating for your brand, which is incredible. Those people want to see us do well, obviously, but they're going out and asking the bars around them, like, why don't you have Old Youngs? Why? How can we help you? So it's everything.
As somebody who's invested in quite a few companies on the Birchal platform, that's something I look for when I go out into the community. And if I'm at a bar and I see that they've got a product from one of the companies we've raised for or that I've invested in, I'm like, oh, brilliant, I'll get that. And I think that's probably a huge thing for your investors, and it's actually driving consumer behaviour going forward and driving your sales.
Oh, without a doubt, those people are going to be out there advocating for us and purchasing products. We've just released a brand new product this week. We go to those investors first. What's the new product? It's a lemon meringue gin.
Ooh.
It is delicious.
I'm sad we're not sipping on it right now.
It can be arranged.
It's not too early in the day. I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. Something that I really wanted to talk to you about today was how difficult it is for distilleries, breweries at this current time. You know, every 6 months the taxes are going up. What effect do you think that's had on the industry as a whole from a distiller's perspective?
Look, from a distiller's perspective, it is brutal. It's the third highest tax regime in the world. So we pay about $30 a bottle before GST, so $33 by the time you put a tax on a tax. And the fact that it does go up every 6 months is really tough because you can't be increasing your retail price every 6 months. Mm-hmm. The consumers aren't going to understand that. They don't want to know. They want to see that your gin is your price. So right. We absorb a lot of that cost. And of course, the differential between a drink is a drink is a drink, right? Mm-hmm. And so the same amount of alcohol, whether that be wine, beer or spirits, are taxed at completely different rates.
Right.
And so beer is roughly half of spirits. Wine can be as little as 1/20th of spirits. So on a standard drink, you're paying about $1.15, I think is roughly the amount nowadays in tax, whereas in a beer it's about 50. And it might be as low as 5 cents.
Okay.
So you have a complete differential, and because it's indexed it compounds. So the gap between wine and spirits just gets big. Wine and spirits, or beer and spirits, just gets bigger and bigger and bigger because the government puts 4% on a bigger number. The gap gets wider and wider and wider. So it is tricky.
So at what point does this stop?
It doesn't. It hasn't stopped in 40 years. There's been something like, I think it's 60 excise increases since it became indexed. So this continues. So when I started, to give you a perspective, the headline rate was, I think, about $77 per pure litre of alcohol.
Okay.
It's now $101.85. That's 8 years later. So it just continues to grow. And it is definitely tough. It's something that we have to live with, and it's something that we've continued to, I've dealt with now for 8 years. But it doesn't make it any easier. And every year, and like right now, we've got to guess what the increase is going to be. So we're getting asked what's our prices going to be in August from our suppliers, from our wholesalers. And we've got to take a wild guess as what the government's going to put that amount up. So we literally get told on about the 30th of July what it's going to be on the 1st of August.
No.
Yeah. So we don't even know what we've got to put these prices up in anticipation, but we don't know what the increase is going to be.
How is this sustainable?
It's a sin tax, right? And the government gets billions of dollars from this.
Okay.
And so you can explain that to a politician and say to them, hey, look, this is not fair. And they'll say, this is not okay. And then they'll ask, how much do we raise from that? Like a couple of $1 billion and that.
Wow.
And they back away, right?
Okay.
Because that's a really, and the Treasurer's got, like, that's a very big hole to fill. If suddenly that $2 billion, or it's more than that, became $1 billion, then how do you refill? And you've got to be able to go to the public and say, we now need to fill that hole with something. How are you going to do that? So it's not a simple solution, because it's a bit like gambling revenue. Everyone knows that it's not the greatest, but it's something that governments are addicted to. It's very, very difficult to walk away from.
Sure. I mean, you look at gambling versus, the alcohol industry. The gambling industry, it's not the small players who are getting detrimentally affected by it. There aren't small business owners who have mini casinos. There's no craft casinos out there, are there? So you're looking at craft distilleries and brewers, and they're the ones who are being affected, and they're the ones who are so passionate about their businesses, and they're trying to contribute to the startup landscape, the alcohol industry as a whole. And how do you communicate that with politicians who are just looking at the dollars?
Look, 10 years ago when I started, there were 30 distilleries in the country. Now, less than 10 years later, you're talking about over 800.
Wow.
So it has been an enormous growth industry. So the Australian Distillers Association, actually, I was sitting with David Vitale this morning having breakfast, and we were reminiscing about the conference that we went to 10 years ago, when there were literally the distillers sat round a table.
That's wild.
And now I'll be at the conference starting next weekend, and there'll be 600 people in the building. So it's just a very different landscape.
Yeah.
And wine did this incredibly well. They advocated for their industry. They got fantastic support from government, and they built a global brand.
Okay.
So that is the potential for Australian distilling, and we are such a young industry. I'm considered a veteran, and I've been doing this. Old Youngs is 8 years old, right? And I'm considered a veteran.
That's wild.
It is, isn't it? And so there will be a time, and we are getting better at advocating to government about that. So it's about continuing to have the conversation, and I think we're starting to get attention, and government's starting to realise that, yes, Australian spirits can follow that incredibly well-worn path, and that there's a clear view to what Australian spirits can do, because that's what Australian wine did, right?
Okay.
So it's just about continuing to have that conversation and let people know that Australian spirits can be a powerhouse. And like right now, we are, and these are rough numbers, but like the amount of spirit that's consumed in Australia, that's produced in Australia, is incredibly small. Incredibly. You're talking about 1 or 2, 3, 4%, right?
Okay.
And if you go back 40, 50 years, it wasn't too dissimilar in wine, that a lot of the wine in Australia was produced in France and Germany. It was German Riesling and French Claret and things like that. Yeah. And the Australian wine industry was brilliant at saying, hey, it's not that French wine is bad or German wine is bad, it's that, but you could be drinking Australian.
Totally.
And that's the opportunity for our industry, is to go from being, that's domestically produced and consumed, to 50, 60, 80%. There's no reason, there's nothing wrong with Bombay Sapphire. It's very, very good. But why would you drink Bombay when you could drink Old Youngs or Four Pillars or Manly Spirits or Never Never or Prohibition? Like, there are fantastic Australian brands there now. So it's not to say that the international brands aren't good. It's just that there's an innate parochialism. But also it makes so much sense to drink and support Australian industry and a growing Australian industry. So that's our opportunity, is to go from being like a 3 or 4% of the domestic consumption to a much bigger proportion of that. And so that grows that size of our industry, and it grows our potential. And then when you've done that, you've created big enough businesses who can then go out and trailblaze and export internationally as well.
Absolutely. Do you think that, obviously, the price point of a bottle of gin would influence the purchasing decision from a consumer? Obviously, you're having to slowly increase your prices because of the taxes that are put onto alcohol in Australia. Do you think that that's going to deter consumers from buying a bottle of Old Youngs versus, say, a bottle of Bombay Sapphire?
Well, they pay the same tax as us. So from that point of view, that is a level playing field. So whether you're an international or whether you're local, that tax is the same. So yes, they have economies of scale, and they operate in markets where it's a lot more profitable because the tax is a lot less. So they have those international profits that they can subsidise against making sure that they've got the market share that they want in Australia. But from that point of view, I believe that isn't our major hindrance. We can continue to take market share off those international brands, and that won't be affected as much by the tax regime. There's some interesting settings at the moment around support for the industry that I would argue aren't actually supporting the industry, but that's a whole new podcast that you don't have 3 or 4 hours for me to go into. But the opportunity is still there, no matter what. The tax is brutal, and the consumer ends up being the person who ends up paying that, because you walk into a store and you've got a bottle of wine that you can buy for $15, $16, and a bottle of spirits is going to be somewhere between $50 and $60, well, let's $50 and $80. That's a given, because the tax is $30. So there's just no way of getting around that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely makes sense. I mean, going through the equity crowdfunding route, you've now got over 800 more people who can advocate for your company and for your industry as a whole. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, as I said, it's vitally important to us. It's something that we've been really focused on to make sure that we continue to communicate with those investors, and we call them partners. They are partners. It's that same as me starting out on day one and having 2 or 3 partners in a business. These people have chosen to be a part of our business, so we consider them partners. And each one of those people, if we treat them with respect and if we communicate well and if we take them along on the journey and all of those things, then they do get excited. And I want them to be bugging their friends at a barbecue and telling everyone about how great we are and what we've done and the latest release, or the fact that they got access to this gin before everyone else, to the point that the friends around the barbecue are like, oh my God, the next time they come up to invest, I'm going to invest too, because I'm sick of listening to my mate rave about it. I had that conversation last night at a tasting. Someone's like, I missed out on your last round. And look, we're really lucky because it was less than a day. But they were, will there be another round? Because I want to be a part of it.
That's so nice to hear, and I'm sure as a business owner it's so flattering to hear that these people absolutely love it so much that they are desperate to be involved and desperate to be part business owners with you and be along for the ride.
It's humbling because like watching that raise, I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
And to see it go and be so successful in such a short amount of time was mind-blowing for me, because I'd never done it before. You guys were telling us that it was looking really good and that great number of expressions of interest and really good engagement and all those things. But until someone actually signs and clicks like submit or whatever it is, that's until that happens, you don't know. I didn't know what to expect. And so, it was humbling, but it also gives you an enormous confidence that you're doing something right.
Yeah.
Because it means that you've built a community who are excited about what you do, and especially when it happens so quick, that meant that there were a whole bunch of people who just couldn't wait to get on board. Mm-hmm. A lot of those people we spoke to were like, hey, I met you 8 years ago when you're standing behind that counter and I could see the passion that you had for your business, and we just wanted to be a part of it. So that was really fantastic to allow those people to be a part of it, but also just an enormous vindication of what we've been doing to date, that many people were excited to get involved so quickly.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
It was fun.
And for you, I imagine it was quite a big learning process doing that. What do you think was the biggest thing that you learned about your business?
It's interesting. Probably two things there, right? One was the process. And I lent so heavily on Birchal on that, about understanding how you communicate to people, making sure that we worked really hard to make sure that we communicated with and built our community and made sure that we were... Someone gave me a really great piece of advice, and that was, make sure the first time you speak to your mailing list, make sure it's not to ask for money. Like, make sure that you've been communicating to these people, as we had been doing for years. Mm-hmm. But you don't want to find a mailing list and then say, hey, do you want to invest in our business? So for us, we'd built a community and we're able to communicate to them and say, hey, now that's one part. So part of that was listening to you guys and getting the advertising right, making sure the comms were right, and making sure that we worked on our PR and all of the things that are really important to getting that campaign right. And then the other part to it was just making sure that we had a compelling story to tell, and we told it well.
Yeah, and I think that you do, and I think that every time I've spoken to you, do come across in a very genuine, natural way, and I think it's portrayed to your investors, and there's that element of trust. And particularly when you're speaking to larger scale investors, you don't want to get on the phone and say, hi, my name is James, can I please have some money? Say, hi, can I please have some advice? I'm thinking about valuing my company at X. What do you think it's worth? And having that price discovery process during your expression of interest period, I think, is really invaluable, and it's something that you don't get in a lot of other arenas when you are trying to raise capital. Did you find that really helpful?
Look, every conversation I had through that period, and I had a lot of conversations, including, and I did one with my daughter beside me, and so I'm on the call and we're in the car, and of course you get the question, which is like, what's your exit strategy? What would you consider selling the business? And look, you've got investors, and you need to be very upfront that you now have a responsibility to them. So you have to consider any offer that you get, right? And the phone call ends, and she fixed me with the dirtiest look. And she's like, and I was like, what? And she's like, you said you'd sell the business. And I was like, yeah. And it's like, well, wouldn't it be great if I could come and pick you up from school every day, and we can maybe go on a couple of extra holidays and all those things. She's like, no, I want to run it. And I was like, this is an 11-year-old, 10 then. So it was kind of cool. But even that was nice. She's starting to see what the business is happening. But
I mean, it really is the old and the young, isn't it?
There you go. But yeah, so those conversations, sorry to go off on a tangent, but those conversations were massive, because you learn you learn why people are excited about your business. What are the touch points? What are the things that they can see I'm passionate about, but you can also see what they're passionate about. And a lot of it wasn't, I'm doing this for a 5x return. They were saying, I have investments in plenty of different things, but I want an investment that I can visit, touch, feel, potentially influence, something that I can be proud of, something that I can talk around the barbecue. Like, I own a share in a gin company. Like, that's something that where people are like, so there were all sorts of different motivations for people to be invested.
Yeah.
But it was very clear it wasn't just monetary. It
100%.
was about wanting to be, and saying, I want to invest in something local was huge as well. That was another really big one. Like, I want to invest in someone that I can see that business, I can visit that business. It's not me owning shares in something that might do something globally that I can't visit their headquarters. They were like, and it's great. We sent everybody their investor cards, and they're made of metal and they're gorgeous.
Love them.
And people come in and they're like, I've got my investor card, and which is great. And we wanted people to have that pride in it,
Yeah,
which is cool.
absolutely. So obviously you got capital out of that raise. What was the biggest thing that you got out of it that didn't have a monetary value?
The investors, the brand ambassadors.
Yeah.
It's building that community. Continuing to build that community is so important because, so that's the huge one. You've just you've just continued to grow that community, and that community is obviously passionate about what we do as well.
Was there a particular initiative or product that came out of the shareholders that you took on board?
Not exactly. So we sort of not as much, no. So in terms of product, no. Look, we know what we want to. We're good at making gin. We're good at making vodka, and we've got brandy coming. So we've got enough on our plate from that point of view. Look, it's our 10th birthday coming up in a couple of years. Will there be an investor gin then? Solid chance. But from that point of view, no. It's more about learning from them about where could we be, where would you like to see us, like the market intelligence that comes back. This bar's opening around the corner from me. We're not going to know that unless they're telling us, right? You've got 800 people out there who are going out and seeing new bars open, new bars close, new bottle shops opening. That intelligence is amazing.
They're doing the research for you, essentially. So let's cast our minds back to the very beginning. What inspired you to start the business?
So I definitely told this one on the webinar, but so it genuinely does go back to as simple a conversation as me talking to my brother and saying, know that little town of Gingin north of Perth? We should make gin there, and then we can call it Gin. Like it's a sliding doors moment, right?
Yeah.
That tiny little thing that tiny little idea just sent me down a rabbit hole of, and it used to nag at the back of my head, just gin. And so that was enough for me to actually go out there and say, well, what would it take to set up a gin distillery, and what would it take? And look, I could see all these when I started to look, I could see green shoots in gin that I see in brandy now, funnily enough. But so for me, it was, I felt like gin had always been a drink of choice for me. It's something that I'd always been passionate about. I liked the idea of this gin. And then I looked, and the timing looked right as well. So I could see that craft spirits we've gone from 30 to 800 distilleries. I was looking at that and seeing that it looked like there was craft spirits were going to do what craft beer had done 20 years ago and what boutique wine had done 40, 50 years ago. So it felt the time was right. But then, I've got a horrendous habit of career tangents. So at that time, I was CEO of Swimming WA, and I was like, actually, I think I'll go make gin. But it wasn't, there had actually been a lot of time and research before I did that.
Yeah, right.
But for a guy who had a design agency who then moved to Lithuania and then coached the national women's hockey team and then came back and worked in advertising and then went into sports marketing and then ended up at swimming and then said, I'm going to go make gin. It was I have career ADD clearly, but
fine about it. Life is short, but it's also long.
Yeah, and so look, and I'm unemployable now, so I'm going to make it work. It's that little idea was the very birth of it, but then the research and then finding the mothballed distillery in the Swan Valley, which is why Old Young's happened before Gin, And then I think all of the things that I'd done before, some of the marketing, some of the advertising, even some of the coaching about building a team and all of those things all came together, and love cooking, so like flavour. And I'd done a bit of, I'd got reasonably good at wine tasting, and so I had a decent palate. So everything sort of came together and worked really well to launch a gin distillery.
Yeah, right. So I know you've got some big plans for getting Swan Valley on the map. Can you give me a little bit more insight, or is this a little bit of a secret at this
Some
stage?
of it's a secret. So look, 12 months ago we said we're going to build a cathedral of gin, right? It was one of our 5 pillars, what we said in the race. So
Amazing.
we haven't been standing still on that. So we have conducted an international architecture competition. I got to, my wife is an architect and my brother's an architect, right?
Amazing.
So basically I went and thought about the 12, and did a lot of research, and basically approached the 12 most exciting architects that I could find on the planet. Like, we didn't muck about. One of the architecture firms we approached designed the Opera House in Oslo.
Wow.
Right. Their first job was a little thing called the Library of Alexandria. So they did the new Library of Alexandria. And so we approached incredible firms, but some small, some huge, and hoped that 3 or 4 of them might be interested. All 12 of them said that they were interested in the project.
Wow.
So then I had the funnest day ever, where I literally speed dated 12 architects, 15 minutes back to back, so 3 hours, and 2 questions. It was like, what excites you about the project, and what do you want to know from me? And at 15 minutes we had to cut it because I had the next one. And that was incredibly eye-opening for me, because some people came in, they were so well researched and they clearly wanted the job, and some people just assumed that because of their name they'd make a short list.
Right.
And so we cut it down to 3, and then that was a paid competition, and we had 3 submissions, and that was back late last year that they presented.
Okay.
So all of those architects came to WA, to the land that we purchased already.
Brilliant.
It's this stunning block in the Swan Valley. Like 400 metres of river frontage. It's got views with the Darling Scarp behind it. It's beautiful.
Be right back, booking a plane ticket.
Yeah, exactly. And so they came and they walked the block with us. They talked to me for sort of a day about my ambitions for the site and all of those things, and then they went away and designed. And then we had a design jury that judged it all, and we've got a preferred architect. The architect came, so it was a little bit of David and Goliath. The final 2, one was from Tasmania, one was from Oslo. And so, and the Tasmanian firm won. So a local architect won, which was really fabulous. Like, they spent so much time and effort to understand our brand and to understand the sense of humour and the whimsy and the joy and all of the wonder that we wanted to instill into that building, and to create something iconic.
Yeah.
So
right.
the example I could give, there's in Spain, in Rioja, there's been a bit of an architecture arms race, and so someone had Zaha did do something, and then there's this incredible Calatrava building, and then Mark Driscoll got Frank Gehry to come in and kind of mic dropped on everyone. But it was that level of ambition that we wanted to see for this, and I guess the local equivalent is the Cube in McLaren Vale at Darrenberg, and you don't have to like that architecture. That's not important for me. What you've got to appreciate is the ambition of that architecture. And so what Darrenberg have done for McLaren Vale and for South Australian tourism in terms of that Cube is huge.
Absolutely.
It's brought masses of people to McLaren Vale, and when I showed what the winning design was to Tourism WA, they are beyond excited about this, because the Swan Valley is such a plug for the Swan Valley. And the Swan Valley, like 25 minutes from the Perth city, 50 wineries, 8 breweries, half a dozen distilleries now, wine, cheese, chocolate, honey, nougat, all in a little loop that you can drive in about 25 minutes is stunning.
Amazing.
And it's sort of Margaret River, but 4 hours closer, and more compact. But it's never had that one signature, iconic must visit.
Yeah, right.
Because it's all family owned. It's so authentic. Like, the people behind the counter is like a family. It's and it's one of the joys of the Swan Valley is that it is all small ownership, tiny little families that have owned these wineries for 50, 100 years.
Yeah, amazing.
And so that's why Tourism WA is so excited, because they've seen the ambition of what we want to do, and that gives them that one thing that they can then say, you've got to come here and then visit all the other fantastic places in the valley. So that's what really exciting for me, because the Swan Valley I'm a massive advocate for, obviously, so we're not just doing something for us, which is obviously really important for us as growing as a brand, but it's also going to be fantastic, I believe, for the valley as well.
Yeah, and I think as well for investors, it's really exciting to get on board and to be able to contribute to something like that, and they can go and visit and say, you know what, I'm a part owner in this.
Yeah, I'm part owner in this, and I helped build that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is unbelievable.
Yeah, driving up the road, say, see that? I'm a part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's so valuable, and it's really exciting to see where businesses can go. You're not just investing in some gin. You know, there's a story behind it. There's a family behind it. And then growing to this exponential level and getting to say you're a part of it is such an exciting prospect that I don't think has been around for a long time, and people love it.
Oh, absolutely. And like with my stuff, and because when I started, obviously just me, and now we've got, I think it's 54 staff at the moment.
Huge.
And so we, when we bring in a new staff member, I'll always have a coffee with them, because whether they're front of house in the restaurant, or whether they're an assistant distiller, or whether they're new bookkeeper, or whatever it happens to be, I want them to understand that if you're a dishy in the kitchen, you are still a part of. I want them to walk into that same bar and be proud of the bottle that's behind the shelf, that they understand that whether you work in the kitchen side or the distillery side or the tasting room, you're part of this overall business that is, and that there's this building's coming, and that, so you're a part of all of that. You're not just working in the kitchen.
Yeah.
You're a part of Old Young's, and Old Young's is doing all of these things. So if they go to Singapore, I want them to walk into a bar and go, oh my God, there's Old Young's in Singapore. This is so cool. So that it's not just working in a restaurant, you're part of Old Young's.
Yeah.
And that's really important for me.
So looking at international expansion, what areas are you currently in, and where are you looking to enter into?
So we're in Singapore now.
Amazing.
And we're actually in the middle of a project right now. And again, that was one of our pillars, was that international expansion. So we've probably got two parts that we're going to go down. One is an Asian expansion. So we're actively looking at Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Taiwan, Vietnam, potentially India.
Wow.
And then there's a second, slightly more ambitious, but this will probably be part of the next raise, is we've got a great idea for the US as well. US is a really fraught market to get into. You're sort of like going into 50 countries, because every single state has different laws, and they all go back to prohibition.
Okay.
So it's even like great distillers in the US will say we're available in these 36 states or these 14 states. No one has 50 state coverage. But we think we've got a way that'll get us into sort of between 30 and 40 states pretty quickly. So
that's fascinating. It's not something that I knew about, that it was so difficult to get into individual states.
It's incredible. Like some states, the bottle shops are still owned by the government.
What?
Like, yeah. It's so state by state. In some states, the state owns the distributors.
Okay.
It's wild. Every single state's different.
Okay. So what's your approach at trying to break into those individual markets? We're doing some research right now. So we've engaged someone so that we're not just doing it off gut feel. So we're not sitting there going, hey, we've heard that Vietnam's good. What we're doing is we're looking for not just the right market, but the right partners in those markets. So someone who's going to understand our brand, understand the ambitions for the brand, and fits that. Yeah. So we're being a little bit more. It's probably taken a little bit longer than we would have liked, but we know that it's going to give us a better result. So that's basically it's not just right market, but it's right partner. And so we're working through that right now, and it's pretty exciting. We're talking to some really interesting people. Yeah, I bet. And I imagine it takes a relatively large amount of capital to do the research and development so that you can go into those emerging markets. Is that a reason why you are raising capital?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I mean, it is an expensive exercise. It's definitely a really important part of growing the business, because if you want to attract international investment longer term, they want you to be doing well, not just in your home market. They want to see you doing well in multiple markets. So that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on a home market, you've got a home ground advantage. So you can be like what I was talking about before about let's buy Australian.
Yeah.
Now you've got the exact opposite if you're going to Singapore or Malaysia or Thailand. So, well, now we think you should also buy Australian. So, and you don't have the advocates on the ground that we're talking about here. So you've got to be able to distill your story down, right?
Sounds fun.
Thank you. You've got to be able to make sure that story is very clear and be able to tell that story. And so you need to have the resources to be able to, so that someone on the ground who's selling Old Youngs in Malaysia has that story and all of the resources available to them. So whether it's videos of me telling the story of why the spirit happened, or all of the tasting notes and all of the collateral and marketing and something, so that person can tell the story hopefully in almost as passionate a way as if I was standing there.
Yeah, 100%. And do you find that there's a bit of a reputation for quality products coming from Australia when you are in other countries?
Without a doubt. Yeah, definitely. So again, we're really lucky to follow again that path of wine. Like there's never, Australia's renowned for like great produce. Yes, the wine industry story is huge, and so there's almost an intrinsic. Well, Australian spirits, they're probably going to be good.
Sure.
And so therefore, yeah, you definitely do get to piggyback on the quality, whether that's the quality of our seafood, or whether that's the quality of our produce, or whether that's the quality of so many of those products. So we do get to follow in those footsteps, which is really helpful.
And how important is it to you to use quality Australian ingredients?
Everything. And yeah, it's so important for us to showcase the quality of Australian product, and we wouldn't do it any other way. The only thing that we don't use that's not Australian is our juniper, and that's because there is no commercially grown juniper in Australia as yet, but we're going to plant some at the new place.
Is the similar product, is it the Tasmanian pepperberry?
Oh, no. So there is a native juniper called Boobiala, but it's similar, but it's not. You would still need juniper to make it gin, and juniper's a bit of a strange beast. It grows incredibly slowly. So juniper grows at about a metre every 10 years. And so if you plant, there's no good commercial reason to plant a juniper plantation. It takes too long. It doesn't make sense. Most of the juniper in the world is actually grown in the wild and then harvested, not rows of juniper trees.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So it's sort of like what I went to Tuscany last year. I was lucky enough to go to Tuscany last year, and
it's a good
so I
excuse
visited.
To go.
Yeah, well, I had to visit my juniper.
Oh, you had to. Of course.
But when I spoke to our supplier, I was like, "So can I visit some of the producers, some of the farmers?" It doesn't work that way. These people have their secret spots in the forest, and they go and harvest, and then it all gets aggregated back to the world's juniper. So,
wow.
And that's Macedonia and a bunch of places. But our juniper comes from Tuscany, so it was very cool driving along the road and then literally seeing the bush and pulling over and going, "Oh my God!" And then you realise how spiky they are and a massive nightmare, and like you need gloves to pick, and it's just.
Oh wow!
Yes,
that's really interesting. It's not something that I was aware of, and probably a lot of people wouldn't be aware that that's how you harvest juniper berries.
And it's even worse than that, because it's not actually a berry, it's a pine cone. It's the world's smallest pine cone. So it looks like a berry, but it is not actually a berry.
Okay.
And so at any one time you've got a 6-month-old cone, like seed pod, that is green.
Okay.
And the 18-month-old one that has turned purple, which is the ripe juniper berry that you need for gin.
Yeah.
So you can't even mass harvest because you would knock off all the green berries and now you don't have next year's harvest. So it's handpicked.
Wow.
Berry by berry.
So is it quite expensive as a product?
Yes, is the short answer, especially the quality that we use.
Right. And do you think that has a knock-on effect? Because a lot of the time, my mum, for example, she'll say, oh, gin's getting so expensive. Do you think it's because of the price of the ingredients?
Look, we've all sorts of things. So like COVID meant that shipping went through the roof. Price of glass went through the roof. Mm-hmm. Materials for paper, the price of paper went through the roof. So labels went up. That's something that those cost pressures plus the constant tax increases. It's a never-ending circle, and it's starting to like sort itself out now.
Okay.
But it's been the last 3 or 4 years have just been brutal.
Yeah. How do you keep positive in those times? You know, you're seeing everything increase. Is there ever a time that you feel, oh, is this worth it?
Thankfully, no. I've got enormous optimism for where Australian spirits industry is going, and I think that we are beneficiaries of that, and also hopefully part leaders in that. Mm-hmm. So we have been very lucky in, I guess, our timing of when we came into the market, but also I think we've done really well in terms of the awards that we've won and the quality of the product that we make and the people that we've been able to attract to the business. That's gives me enormous faith and, that we're going in the right direction.
And I guess that's what keeps you going is your consumers and the people who believe in the brand.
Without a doubt. Yeah, always.
Yeah, amazing. I could literally talk to you all day. I'm finding that I've learnt so much. But honestly, it's been a privilege to have you on the Birchal platform previously, and we're so excited to have you on board again. And what do you think this next round of crowdfunding will be for the business?
So we said 12 months ago that we wanted to make WA history. We lent very heavily into that a local and tell that local story. And realistically, we said we were going to do 5 things, and we've done those 5 things. And one of them was we wanted to build this cathedral of gin. Now we've got the incredible plans for that. So we want to build that history now. Great. So we've got this iconic home for old youngs that we want to build, and I think it's something really tangible for people to say, hey, I'm now a part of creating that. So that's what we want to do next. We want to give people that opportunity to, the brand continues to build, but now this is something incredibly, like you can literally touch that we want to do next. So I think that's pretty exciting. It's incredibly exciting for us to have a forever home for the brand. And when you see the plans, you'll see what I mean by that. But and it is going to be unbelievable. And yeah, so for people to actually be able to invest in that, we're really, really, really excited to have that happen.
I'm really excited too, and I know that the investors will be honestly thrilled to be on board as much as we are. So thank you so much for bringing this opportunity to Birchal and the investor community. And thank you for sharing your story today. This has been so interesting, and I've learnt a lot.
Oh, look, it's lovely to come in, and it's really nice to relive the success of 12 months ago, and it's made me even more excited for what we're going to do in the next couple of months.
Thank you so much, James.
Pleasure.